That way it's easier for me to find the link later. Hopefully, I figure out a better system for this next semester and it works a lot better. So let's see, there it is. Test. Hopefully, I figure out a better system for this next semester and it works a lot better. Volume's working well, so we're good. Okay, so we've got the lecture going. All right. There you go. So you have not missed anything yet. We've just been experiencing a lot of technical errors or technical difficulties. So, we're going to start. All right. So we got values, okay? Some people are probably wondering what values has to do with perspective, but what do we call it when we refer to spatial depth in terms of values in classes? We call it atmospheric perspective, right? So in a sense, it's taking the idea of everything having a common diminishing point, or a common point of vanishing, or a common point of diminishment, into not only the realms of the lines that are created when they do it, but also into the realm of, if you make everything black and white, it also affects the realm of color as well. So with values, especially atmospheric values, the general rule of thumb is as things get further away from you, the values diminish. It becomes more of one singular tone, one singular value. As they get closer to you, you receive a much broader range of values. The area that has the most range of values isn't going to be directly in front of you. So, for example, everybody put your palm in front of your one eye, your dominant eye. See how dark it is, and then slowly pull it back, and you'll see the values change. Okay? Until you go too far back, or as far as you can, and then you'll be able to see like there's less of a change in values again. So there's like a happy medium right here, where you get the greatest change or the greatest contrast of your values in comparison to right here, because it's so close to your vision that all those values just become really dark. All right, that's one general rule of thumb. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't break that rule. Like I've said before, you learn the rules, but you learn how to break them by knowing the rules. Okay. So with that, that's the basic idea of values. Another idea is something that was really solidified for me the year I graduated, and I went to a workshop in LA with a school called Red Engine Studios. It's a school started up by Steve Jung and a couple of his buddies too, who are in the industry. And they had a lecture or a workshop, a 2-day workshop there that was hosted by them, but it was ran by Scott Robertson. How many of you guys know who Scott Robertson is? Some of you guys do. Most of you guys should after having his book. Scott Robertson talked about something called halfway to black theory. So essentially what it means is, let's say if you have a value scale of 0 through 10, right? And your midtone value is a 5. What is going to be your dark value of that? Can anybody tell me right off the bat? Not really, unless you know the theory. So the way the theory works is, if your midtone value is 5, then you go halfway between the midtone and the absolute black value, which is going to be 10 in this case, and that is your dark value for that area. So if your midtone is a 3, then halfway between 3 So we got 0, which is absolute white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if your midtone is a 3 value, you have between 3 and 10, which is black, so you have to go halfway. So here's 4 and 9, 5 and 8, and then 6 and 7. So your darkest value for that midtone, or your shadow value for the midtone, is going to be either 6, 7, or 6.5. Okay? That's how the halfway to black theory works. In contrast to that, you can use that same theory to find your light value. All right? So we can think of it as halfway to white, which is 0 and 3. That means our value that we can use is either going to be a 1 or 2, or more preferably a 1.5. Okay? If you want to give yourself a lot more leeway once you get used to the system, you could just drop it down to going half and then half of that. So half of that is going to be the 2 instead. All right? That way it gives you more room. Because if you go to, let's say if you go to pure white and pure black right away for your dark values and your light value, can you go any lighter than a white and a black in terms of values? No, right? So that's why a lot of times you save those for your absolute finish. Whites are purely for highlights. Pure black is primarily for deep, dark edges or lines. Okay? So never touch a 0, which is a pure white, and never touch a 10, which is the pure black. So think of it as 0%, 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Can you go past 100%? In terms of effort, yes. Figuratively? Technically, no. Okay? Any confusion about how that works? No? All right. See how simple my value system is? This is the value system I follow. But I've learned to manipulate it so that I can make it work with what I need to, by just keeping in mind that whatever my local value is, meaning the midtone value is, my shadow value of that is going to be halfway between that and black. All right. That works really, really well if you're going to stick with natural lighting, because that tends to fall under the laws of natural lighting. But let's say you have a stage light or a spotlight, then that is up to you to kind of push the contrast. Then you already know that, let's say if your midtone is going to be a 5, then your contrast is going to be a little higher. So if your shadow value is supposed to be the 6 and the 7.5, right? Then I would just push it to be an 8, because the stronger your light source is, the stronger of a contrast you have between light and dark. Does that make sense to you guys? That's why a lot of people love to use diffuse lighting in concept art, which is like that really soft light that kind of dissipates on people. But there's a very subtle change in contrast between them, unless they purposely up that saturation to create a much more stark difference between the light and shadow values. Right? The importance of value, though, if you can figure out values, it doesn't matter what colors you put in there, it will still work out much better than if you got your colors working, but your values sucked. Okay? As you guys can tell up there. So we, as you guys have walked past that poster numerous times, there's the original image, there's the value only with no color, which is still readable, but then once you get into the color only with absolutely no value, it becomes a blur. There's no readability within it, and then the black and white version of color only. So you can see the big difference values make. All right, so keep this in mind. Values describe form. Okay, values are used to describe form. Color is used to help you describe mood and time. And when I say time, it means in terms of the time of the day. Because think about it, if we have an image with the same values, right? Let's say if we had the same exact black and white value image. One has the colors of like a blue, a dark blue that fades down to like a royal purple. The other one has a gradation on it that is orange with red. Okay, that automatically gives you 2 different times a day if you're just thinking that aspect. The blue and purple is normally associated with nighttime because of the lunar light, right? The moon gives off a cooler light. The sun gives off a warmer light. So that means the sun is either coming up or it's at the sunset period. Okay? Of course, that's not taking consideration. That's for like a perfect world scenario. We do have days like today, which is really dark and gloomy, but that's because we have rain clouds above us, and we have all that beautiful smog and pollution here in good old Detroit. So there are things that you have to take in consideration for that. But that's one of the easiest ways to remember the difference and the importance. Values are used to describe your form. Colors are used to describe mood and your, time, okay? Values also help you describe your light source, where your light source is coming from, okay? So if you guys are working on an illustration later on in your further career, and you're wondering why something's not working out the way it should, like a form's not reading the way it should, it's not because of your color that you have on it, it's because of the value that you have on it. The value of that color is not working correctly. But let's say if you've done your value study, you've got it all working, but your mood's not reading the way it's supposed to. Like, it's supposed to be a really angry piece, or the guy's supposed to be like, it's supposed to be like a really, it's just supposed to be angry in the most literal sense. So you got a guy in the front like just snarling and whatnot, but he doesn't look angry. He looks more like he's dead. It's probably because your colors aren't working out the right way. Because when you get angry, your blood literally doesn't technically boil. What it does is it's rushing through your body, like it's rushing to your head and all that. That's why they say you get hot-headed. Blood is warm. That's where it's going to build up that extra heat. Your blood is all rushing up there because your blood is flowing like crazy. Because your heart's pumping more as you get angrier and angrier. So that causes your blood flow to circulate faster and faster, and then you get those red spots when you're angry. Okay? So that's that. Questions about that? No? Okay. Now, let me show you how it works in a literal sense. Okay. Alright, so once again, smudge guards, they come in handy. Just to give you guys a heads up, I hate Photoshop CC because it glitches out all the time. This light, yeah. We'll turn on this light for you guys so you guys have some light. Yeah. Those of you guys who are by the window, feel free to raise it up a little bit so that you guys need light if you need it. Alright, so as we were saying, value describes form, right? So, if I do something like this, right? Do we have any form to it yet? It's just a basic shape, right? But if we want to describe form to it, let's give it a different base value. Let's go about here. Okay. We'll put that there. And then we're going to incorporate, let's say the lighting is coming from this direction, all right? So that means this is going to be my lighter source, this is going to be my mid-tone, this is going to be my shadow tone. So this is my mid right here, okay? I can leave that. But I want to find the light value, okay, the light side. I can click on that. This is why it's good to have like a value sheet next to you guys if you're doing traditional paintings too. Then I would look on my value scale. All right, this is white, that's my tone, that's my half white. There. I've got that going already. Okay? Now I'm going to put in my shadow tone, or my shadow value. Not tone, value. So if my light source is coming from over here, this is going to be my shadow side. I'm going to go back to my midtone, where I'm at, my black, halfway. Done. It works. Really easy, carved out that form. There's no guessing about the values. Okay? Alright. Now, let's trip you guys out a little bit more. We are going to put color into it. So let's say, well, actually before we put color in it, we'll do this. Open up a new one. Go into Firefox. Let's look up a nice red apple. And totally didn't spell that right. Where's a nice neutral looking apple? Is that one reading as a more naturalistic lighting on an apple up there for you guys? Or is it this one? This one?
Yeah, it's not as clean.
Okay. Yeah, that looks a little bit more naturalistic compared to, alright, let's do it back. Pull this into Photoshop. Of course you're gonna give me issues again. Of course. Nothing wants to work for me today. Okay. Drag and drop. There we go. Alright. So, this apple right here on my screen is looking pretty, actually kind of blown out. Let's pull another one. Oh, keyboard commands, they come in handy if you guys learn them. Alright, so we got two apples here, okay? It's easy to tell that this one's going to be a darker value in comparison to this one, right? But, let's say, let's see if you guys can guess the value on these, alright? How many of you guys think this one is going to, what do you guys think the midtone value of this is going to be? Anybody? On a scale of 0 through 10? A 3? We got 1 3. How many of you guys agree with the 3, the 30%? Raise your hand. I got 3 or 4. 40 or 50? Alright, hands high if you think it's a 30. Hands high if you think it's a 40. Hands high if you think it's a 50. Okay, how about this one? I got a 60 on this one. Anybody else? 70? Okay. Alright. I got the values. So, let's see, mid value is probably going to be about here. Yeah, precious. Yep. And we'll go with the midtone here. Alright, so you guys were thinking 30? Let's see, as soon as I click this, much darker. It's in the 50 range. 30, 40s, so those of you guys who thought the 50, that one's in the 50 range. This one, 60s, 70s. Notice how much darker it actually is. This right here is the 0. This is about 10. This is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Right? So colors will trip you out because of that. Alright? It looks, a lot of people think that reds are gonna, like a natural red is going to be a 20 or 30, the 30 range of values for the most part, a lot of people do. Same thing for yellow, but in reality, their values are gonna be a lot darker than they seem. That's why we tell you guys to blur your vision when you're looking at things. When you actually blur your vision at the apples, it's actually a lot darker than what you initially think, right? Yeah, okay. Now if we grab the light side of this guy, so here's the light, not the highlights, but the light, right? Here's the original. So you guys see it's right there. This one, where does it fall? Roughly about halfway between the pure white and the percentage, right? It's actually going a little bit more towards my half and then half. So half is going to be here. Okay, so that's that. This is the 50% mark, and then this is about halfway between these two. So halfway to the white with the double half. You guys see that? So that's why I said it works primarily with natural realistic lighting. For the most part, it works with most lighting scenarios. You can make it work with most lighting scenarios, keeping in mind about the halfway to black theory. But it's a really nice, simple way to work with values. Like I said before we started recording, right? My value lecture isn't anything mind-blowing, nothing that's epiphany, eye-opening, things like that. It's really, really simple. How many of you guys were expecting it to be that simple? One. How many of you guys thought it was going to be a little bit more complicated with the values? A couple of you guys. How many of you guys just feel dumb now? I did the first time I saw that. I was like, is that easy? Come on. Can't be that easy. Oh, but it is, young man. It is. Alright, so we'll do it right here again. So there's our mid, our light. Okay? Halfway, halfway. There's our half, the double half. We'll go with our shadow tone. So it should be somewhere about here. Oops. There. Why is that side darker? Or lighter? Oh, it's because I picked up the door shadow. So there's our shadow tone. Okay? Same thing for this guy. His shadow tone is. Alright. Now let's find a yellow object, just to show you guys. Values within colors are not as light as you would think they are. They would be. They hurt your eyes, but they're not as light as you think. Something not as blown out, a little bit more naturalistic. Just let me know if you can't hear me. I already know that fan is annoying. And that one is a fake. Again, we got values on these ones. Ready? Way darker than you thought, right? How many of you guys were expecting them to shift into that darker value? One? Okay. But do you guys see the importance of understanding the values? This is why a lot of times, how many of you guys have had issues with your illustrations that you've done in color, where you're like, I'm putting in the red, I'm putting in the orange, but it just doesn't look right? It's because of this. It's primarily because you guys aren't nailing the proper value of that color. Anybody got tape?
Yes, we're looking at that.
Yeah, we did that.
We were gonna. Anybody got tape?
I'm gonna see if I got some of this guy.
This is ridiculous. It's like strawberry. I love that face. You just like giving up hope. Like I'm done.
This thing is really stupid. For those of you guys who don't understand the pain they're going through, stand underneath here and try to hear me talk.
It's pretty bad. Yes, I have had it already.
I don't have my effect on it. Yeah. When you got that effectively, Alright.
It's messing up with everything.
I'm gonna need to borrow that really quick again.
Well, it's gonna die down as soon as you put the zip up there.
Mm-hmm. It's already dying down a little bit. There it goes.
Now turn back on. Halfway through the lecture.
Okay.
There's one.
How's this one?
That's the one that's like going directly on the, yeah, that's the louder one. Thank you, Stephen, for donating your cardboard.
Any questions while I'm doing this about the values?
Nope.
No? Alright. No questions, forever hold your peace.
That is so much better.
Don't worry, I'm gonna step right off.
Try not to. Maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, this one's gonna be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a pressed against it, so it's got, and I gave it just enough slack to kind of let you get
Okay.
Okay. Better.
Much better.
Alright, so now everybody can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Alright. And I need to lower this down. You good over there, Shauna?
Yeah.
So that has a better view of that for you guys. Okay. Alright, so values. A little more deceptive than you think. Simpler than you think, but equally deceptive. Alright? So, one reason that a lot of underclassmen tend to have issues with their colors is that they're thinking that, oh, this is yellow. It's gotta be this bright cad yellow light. No, it's not gonna be that bright cad yellow light. The reason why it looks like it's bright cad yellow light is because of the contrast that's being created by the darker valued colors in comparison to that yellow. So it's making that yellow read like it's super bright, right? So let's say if I put a standard red. How many of you guys think a regular red's going to be up here, like the standard fire hydrant red everybody loves? No, good, it's not there. Fire hydrant reds and stuff are going to be more about here. And it's actually got a slight tint of orange. Okay? Notice how red that looks, regardless? But their values are pretty similar. Okay? It made the yellow pop out more. Right? So this is where the idea that color affects mood and time, this is how that comes into play. Alright? Everybody's cool with that? Values make more sense to everybody now? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Everybody's just kind of like zombies? Okay. Value lecture. As easy as that. Alright. So, let's say this box has different colors on it. Okay? Let's just say for fun. Alright? So, let's say this side, its regular value is actually, its local value is that. Okay? So then for the dark side of this guy, well, how do we figure that out? Easy. Same thing we did for the other side. We click on this guy, local value, halfway, there's our shadow value. Now we have our shadow value. We want our light value. Well, we look at here, at this local, and here. Whatever step you choose to do this relationship at, everything else must follow. So if you do the double half, this has to be a double half. If you choose to do a single half, this has to be a single half. Okay? So this and that. So we did a single half. So there's my midtone. That means my light value has to be here, or somewhere around there. Alright? Notice how this side doesn't look too dark, this side doesn't look too light. It's because we have the values working in the same relationships that they should be. Okay? Unbeknownst to a lot of people, value can describe color. It can give you a range of colors without you realizing it. Now after seeing the apple and the lemon, can you guys see colors in here now? Understanding that yellow and lemon, or the yellow and red, are kind of around this area. Alright? So if we put a color layer on top, and let's say we stick with a natural red, right? That's how it's going to look. This side looks very simple, very naturalistic. Okay? It doesn't look overblown, oversaturated. It's as if you've just got a really nice white light on it. Now let's say if we put a really bright, obnoxious yellow, right? See how bright that is? A lot of people are, when they choose yellow, they're going to think it's going to be one of these super saturated yellows. That's not yellow. Okay. Yellow is going to be a little bit more toned down. Alright. And there's not much difference there. But there you guys go. Alright. Blue. Alright. That blown out blue that a lot of people love to do in their beginning years. Because they think that's blue. That's not blue. Blue is this. Okay. Orange. Orange is nothing more than brown, a slightly more saturated brown. So, in contrast with what I'm kind of showing you guys right here, along with that, learn your traditional aspects of painting and color mixing. It allows you to be a much, much better digital artist. That's why I know where the colors are at right away. Because I've done a lot of color mixing, I've studied up on traditional painting. I'm not a great traditional painter, but I understand it, I know it, I know how to do it. It allowed me to learn what's orange. Orange is actually a brown, okay? What's a true red? It's not that bright, obnoxious red straight out of the tube. Unless you have a really nice cadmium red, which tends to look really good, but yeah. Okay? So, really simple on that aspect, alright? So, regardless of how complicated you make the internal patterns, so let's say if we do something like this, right? So I'm just choosing random values to put in here. Alright, and I want to get the shadow and the light side of this. Once again, I can just do the same thing I did before. Look here, there's my local, my shadow. Local, shadow. light halfway, keeping it the same relationship I did before. Local. My light halfway. Okay. That took me like what, 2 minutes? Alright, so keep this theory in mind because it'll make your life a lot easier when it comes to trying to nail your values. Alright? This is why that bonus is worth so much, because after I've showed you guys this, it should give you a really, really simple understanding of natural lighting. Really, really simple natural values, natural lighting. It makes it really easy to just not even have to guess. You don't even have to guess about what your values are going to be. You automatically know it once you establish your local values. For those of you guys who are in figure painting 2 right now, this is what you guys were doing when you guys were just doing the 3 values. For those of you guys who are going to be taking figure illustration 2 next semester, this is what that charcoal assignment is supposed to teach you guys, or you guys are supposed to understand by doing that charcoal assignment, where you break an object down into 3 basic values: the midtone, the light, and the shadow. Because the values describe form, okay? Right? So if I wanted to, I could go back in here and give this a very nice soft edge, right? Just to indicate other things. Soften up my edges. Right. So I've softened up my edge, so it's not so hard here anymore. Let's say I want to put in a light a highlight here, just because I'm saying it's catching a little bit of light there. Brush 0, 0. Let's go for hard ground, pure white. Don't want to do that. There's one highlight there, put a highlight here for no reason. Highlight here, alright? Okay, highlight's pure white. Or not pure white. Highlight is your lightest light that should ever be on your whole entire image. Okay? So if this is one of my lighter lights, then I can make my highlight areas this instead. Subtle difference, but it's a little easier on the eye. Okay? It's not as stark in contrast. Especially if you want to do something where it's a little bit more, where you can put a little oomph inside of the center. Alright? Black for your absolute darkest spots. Wow, this is way off. Okay. Describe the form already. With this, I've just caused that area to kind of cave in if it was drawn much thinner. Man, this thing's off. Right? All you need to describe form is 3 values. That's another reason why a lot of students' work doesn't look very professional. If you examine professional work, especially paintings, they tend to be 2 to 5 values at most. Maybe 7 values. but most of the time it's about 5 values at most. And that's counting the pure black and highlight. Alright? Notice, how three-dimensional is that looking? It's looking pretty three-dimensional, it's looking pretty realistic for what it is, although it's super clean. It's because I've only put in 3 values. I'm not overcomplicating the information that your brains are receiving. Humans are very simple-minded creatures, alright? But at the same time, our brains are very complex in the way that we think. It analyzes and compresses a lot of information. The human brain is the #1 computer in the world. Okay? It processes more information than a super high-end, top-of-the-line computer can. It does it all subconsciously, though. Okay? Chelsea. Alright? So that's values. Easy? Questions about values on that aspect? Alright, get back here in 5 minutes. We're going to start on another portion of this, but go and take a quick 5-minute break. Alright?
Are we done this week? I know you're doing it, or just cutting it out, because you don't care, you're paint, and you're doing
Yeah, I'll do that. What's up? No time. Alright, what's going on?
She's going out of town, she's just gonna meet you today or tomorrow, because she picked today.
I said I have the classes just go through, so when we get back from the shop, we'll go to. Let's stop.
Okay. Oh, why is that?
One that, something is leaking, we got all the way.
Good Lord, you were having a day, aren't you? Damn.
You're having just as good of a day as I am, aren't you?
Everybody's ready for the break, that's just what's going on.
Yep.
We're all done, I don't know.
I
I still think that's funny, you had to ask if anybody'd seen that, little boy, like, come on now.
I don't know if everybody else has seen it. If the majority of the classes saw it, I wouldn't have shown it. I would have found something else. I would have put on Pokemon game Let's Play videos for you guys for all I know. Maybe even Minecraft videos.
I'm dead to the curse.
I have a whole drawing of your bag. Yeah, this one.
See, I'm looking. So now, if I could, despite the fact that I want to also do concepting, I'd love for some of the graphic noveling. If I ever had to turn a book into a graphic novel, I really want to do Silmarillion, Tolkien's unfinished works.
Yeah, similarity is a little bit better. That would be a good one.
I mean, it's beautifully written, and just a lot of people don't get it because that was all in his head. It was published after he was dead, so nobody could really ask him, what the hell are you talking about in some parts.
Yeah, because all they have are his footnotes on it, right?
Pretty much, I mean,
Some people have tried finishing it, which I think is like his son.
yeah, because there was supposed to be like 1 more or 2 more chapters to it at the end of it, because it kind of leaves you in a weird spot. And then he does have his unfinished works, but the Silmarillion, as I've been reading it, I'm like, this would be amazing to see as a graphic novel.
Because it's the telling of Sauron
Sauron and Melkor.
and Dumbledore.
No,
Dumbledore?
Dumbledore?
You said Dumbledore?
No, Melkor.
Oh, I was like, I thought Dumbledore wasn't around during that time, and that was a total different book.
Different fandom.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
No, it's the telling of the first evil, so. Of course, I've been laughing to myself saying it should be renamed This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, because the whole beginning of it's nothing more than like destruction.
Yeah, that is why we can't have nice things. Nice things get destroyed all the
Mhm.
time.
So it's quite funny when you look at it from that aspect. We're back.
All right. your lunch.
Thank you for doing this for me.
What?
Thank you for doing this.
No, that's fine. This is my job. No point in having a teacher if they don't teach, right?
Well, I mean, doing Christmas, like doing the painting side of it.
Oh yeah, I was planning to do this anyways. Just to show you guys that it's not just carving out everything.
Right. I love the little face when you die. Now, is this for something, or is it just?
This is really old, this one here.
Oh, okay. So it's everything.
Like I said, this thing's out of date.
So cool.
Still use for stuff.
Yeah. I can tell.
So those of you guys who are here right now, what I'm doing is I'm separating the overlapping areas just to make it a little bit easier for when I'm painting. That way I can get some nice clean edges on those areas. That helps. And I feel like that got louder.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, haha, you thought you could cover me? Not happening. Okay. Fun times. I wish I had a mini EMP bomb so I could throw it in there. Knock it out. I will give you guys this disclaimer. Some people work better with colors first because they can read values naturally in color. But some other people, like me, we don't read color as value. I read color as color, something completely different. I see values on its own. So I tend to work values first, then I build colors upon it. Alright? So here, what I've done so far is I've just labeled this out. I've separated out the overlapping areas using a pen tool to quickly mask in the areas. Labeling my layers. You guys should always label your layers. That helps with understanding what's what. Okay. So this is going to make our life a lot easier. So now, what I've done is I've created are clipping masks. Okay? This is the parent, this is the child. The child always depends on the parent. So, just like in real life, you can't overstep your parents or else you're going to get a butt whooping. So when I paint in this bottom parent layer, I can paint outside of it. But this child layer, I cannot paint outside of it. Okay? You guys see that? I cannot paint outside of the parent. No overstepping the parents. Until I unlink them. That's how much I've overstepped. Alright? So this makes our lives way, way easier. So, to carry on with our lecture on values, I'm going to put in a base value, my local value, on all of the areas. Okay. So we have that. Now, I'm going to decide where my light source is. Alright. I'm going to say it's coming around somewhere like that. So I've got a couple different light sources going. Alright? More of a stage lighting type scenario. So let's say if this is our set that the dinosaur is on, and here he is, really happy, just going around, I'm gonna eat you type thing. Looks like us saying we have one light here, another light here, and another light here, and I'm going to put another light there. So tons and tons of light sources. Alright? We've got that figured out. Alright? So I'm going to start off with the big body portion. I'm just going to put on another layer. So this is going to be local. I'm going to put in my lights. Okay? For the fun of it, I'm just going to paint in a completely different way than I normally do. And I'm going to make this a super soft brush. Enlarge it a little bit. Alright, so it's going to be very soft. There's my local value. I'm going to go halfway. I'm going to do a double half step just to give me some leeway. And now, I'm going to start carving out the form of the body or of the creature. Well, I'm going to put this on top. Overlay. No, let's not do overlay. There we go. Just massing in really simple values. Foreground line. We have our foreground leg. So we've got that. Turn this off. Put another layer on top just to kind of help smooth out some areas. Bring some of this local back in. Just to kind of help describe it. Now I'm going to go back in with some darks, with my darker layer. Turn this off. I've got my local, my shadow value halfway. Boom. I can very, very quickly describe form and slowly adjust it back or pull things back and forth if I need to. Okay, see how quickly that light's starting to carve out? Right. It's the same thing for the foreground arm. I can do the same thing. Go back to my shadow value. So I've got some very quick values reading in. The reason why I like doing a double half is so that I can do this. I know that if this is the halfway mark between the midtone here, and that's my light, right? Then I can go the full half. And really push in the lighting element. now that I have it basically carved in, if I want to now, I can put in colors. I'm just gonna use a typical concept art technique and type in like, I don't know, African savannah. Just mess around with the filters, because I don't feel like thinking about colors. Alright. Let's just watch the videos. Alright, so I'm doing this type of thing just to get a base color in. And I have a basic underlying value underneath. And now I can use all that information to really go in and carve out these areas. To give me my basic colors, values, all that jazz in. There's the recently. And everybody's always like, let's blend colors, let's blend colors. No, don't necessarily need to blend colors when you guys are doing stuff. Alright, greater form change, higher saturation, so I'm gonna bump that saturation up a little bit just to give it a little bit better form change right here. And then I'm gonna lower down the value. Okay. See how this area is starting to get carved out? Alright, I've got the basic values in. This is what I like to do sometimes, just to give basic colors. And then I'll go in and adjust it, and I'll say like, alright, my lighting source is gonna be more of a red light source, so I'm gonna look at this. Let's go to like, where's the color? This guy. And I'm gonna say there's more red in my light source, so I'm gonna bump up my red a little bit, and then that's gonna make this my red light source. That's how that color's gonna look with more of a red light source on it. Alright? So that means my shadow is gonna probably be, because I like to do complementary colors for shadows, just for fun, for myself, because it gives a little bit more pop. If my light source is a little bit more red, then that means my light source on my shadow side, I'm gonna make a little bit more orange. So, for that, and this was more of a green, so what's the complementary color of green? Red. Okay, so I'm gonna make my shadow side a little bit more red. Like literally, I'm gonna put in red. So there's my shadow, same value, but it's gonna be more red. And it doesn't look as weird as you would think it would. Although there are some gray spots that ends up being built up because it's muddy. It becomes a little muddy. Right, so we got the bleeding arms. Okay. And that's how I built up my stuff till I get to something that's more like, where is it? This one. Something more along the lines of this right here, okay? If I zoomed in on this, you would be able to see, because it's so damn tiny. Oops. Notice there's a stark purple here in my shadow with that yellow and orange. Okay, there's a stark blue right here, more violet blue. Alright. I have my orange here. You have this type of yellow here with a little bit of red tints here, and I have like a stark green. I have a stark green right here. Okay? You can't really see it up there, I guess. Let's see if this will pick it up. See? See how purple that is? That's my shadow. Those are my shadows. I put in those colors right there, but they're still keeping within the shadow value. Okay? I like my shadows. You got little greens, little things like that. Okay? Questions about that? That help you guys out a little bit? Alright, done with this guy, because my payment process takes way too long. Okay, now we're gonna get to the 3-point again. That's it for values too. Alright, so value time. Or not value time, 3-point perspective time. Okay? Let's see. Okay. So, refresher for you guys, right? 1-point perspective is this. You have your eye level / horizon line, your CBL, you establish your ground plane, you establish an SP, right? Ground plane / measuring line, eye level / horizon line, CBL, your CV. 1-point perspective, you're going to project a 45-degree measuring point, right? You have your tick marks, your units of measure on the ground plane measuring line, okay? You take those back to your center of vision, because for any object in 1-point perspective, or any object that only has one vanishing point, what is that vanishing point always? Center of vision. The center of vision is always the singular vanishing point for 1 point. Then we cross through from the corner of our room grid or whatever to our 45-degree measuring point, wherever it intersects those lines of diminishment. We create a horizontal and our grid is constructed, right? Cone of vision is 30 degrees from the stationary points, like so. That's our picture plane area, the area that we can see with little to no distortion. 1-point perspective. 2-point. We became a little bit more complicated. There was no longer any this one had perfect horizontals and verticals, right? 2-point perspective is no longer has perfect horizontals, it only has perfect verticals. That is still center of vision line, your eye level / horizon line, still with the ground plane / measuring line, still with a stationary point. But now if you have one vanishing point here, the other one must be at a 90 degrees to that, right? And there we have the beginnings of our 2-point grid. We then have our pipelines being projected through our end point, the 0 point, whatever you want to call it, near point. This is pipeline 2, pipeline 1. We have to get our measuring points, which is the distance from the vanishing point to the stationary point swung up. That's our measuring points. Okay, we have our tick marks on our unit, or on our ground plane once again. We use our measuring points to transfer those onto the pipelines, right? Utilizing measuring point 2 with pipeline 2, measuring point 1 with pipeline 1. So whichever one they belong to, so it's like that, boom, 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 boom. There, right there, that guy. Let's not forget about this one, or this one, him too, her, that person as well, and yada yada, so on and so forth. So we've got that. Once we've got those units of measure, we take those to the vanishing points in whatever direction they look like they belong to. Those tick marks look like they're belonging to vanishing point 2, so they are going to go to vanishing point 2 because they are diminishing towards that direction. Okay? So we have that. The ones on pipeline 2 are going to go to vanishing point 1 because these tick marks are diminishing towards that direction. Who I've heard is coming back next year. Oh great, One Direction concerts all over again. Alright, so we've got that. We're going to do a 30-degree measuring. We're going to do a 30-degree cone of vision from the stationary point once again. That's our cone of vision. If we wanted to find our 45-degree measuring point, like the one we have here, we are going to split the 90 degrees that is formed by the two vanishing points exactly in half. So if my 90 degrees is like that, then half of that. If my 90 degrees from my stationary point is like this, then it's going to be half like that. Okay? Alright, so my 90 degrees split like that. 45, that's my 45-degree measuring point. That will allow me to find perfect squares on the ground. Alright, so we've got that going. And this is low on battery. And I forgot to pull out my charger for it. Questions, concerns, confusions about 2-point? Everybody should be good with that, considering how long ago we've covered that. Okay. Yes. Alright, so 1-point, 2-point. Now we have 3-point perspective. 3-point perspective, we added on a vertical stationary point and a vertical vanishing point, also known as VP3 or VP3 and VSP, okay? In 1-point perspective, we were given, what, 1 random? The rest were given. 2-point perspective, 2 randoms, rest are given. In 3-point perspective, we have 3 randoms, the rest is given, right? There are also no perfect horizontals or verticals, technically. Unless it is a 1-point, 3-point object, which makes no sense to anybody until I've showed you guys and you guys have all seen it, right? 3-point perspective, it's putting 2-point and 1-point together, but at the same time it's kind of not really like it. Because 3-point has one absolute rule that you must follow in order to make it 3-point perspective. All verticals must converge to the vertical vanishing point, which is VP3, right? So, for example, a 2-point cube, a 1-point cube, and then their counterparts in 3-point perspective. Same footprint, but now the verticals must converge. Same footprint, verticals are converging. Quote unquote, a 1-point object in 3 points. Quote unquote, 2-point object in 3-point perspective. This is what we primarily think of as 3-point objects. But to keep it simple for you guys and not to really make it too crazy on you, and to make it so that you guys are not treating all 3 grids as separate entities, 3-point is essentially 1-point, 2-point, but with all verticals converging to that bottom vanishing point, to that vertical vanishing point. Okay? So, I'll write up, so we'll time to go over 3-point. Right? We learned the relationships, quote unquote, multiple formulas, right, that we can put, or the multiple equations that we can put together to create our overall formula to get our grid, to get our 3-point system, right? Because generally, a 3-point is we now have a differentiation between our horizon line and our eye level, because the horizon line is where the sky meets the ground, so it is not the same as the eye level, right? Because the eye level is your line of sight, the horizon line represents where the sky meets the ground. We still have our center of vision line, our vanishing points are still on our horizon line, this is still our center of vision, right? We can still set it up like we're setting up a 2-point grid at first, so I can still put in my stationary points like that. I can still, so that's one random down. I have my second random, which is vanishing point 1. So that's 2 randoms down. We now have 1/3 random that we can still choose, but we have been given our second vanishing point with that 90-degree relationship, right? That's my VP2. So it's still the same as 2-point perspective. 3-point perspective is still the same as 2-point in this respect. Now we are going to establish our camera tilt. This is one of the randoms that I am choosing because this will determine how steep of an angle it's going to be. Remember, if you are within the first 20 or last 20 degrees, it's better to just stick with a simple 1-point perspective or a 2-point perspective, unless you want that very, very subtle shift. If you want that very subtle shift, then the inner 20 degrees are fine. But if you want to have a more obvious 3-point perspective and a more drastic 3-point perspective, you want to stay within the inner 60 degrees, right? The one that's between the two closer 20 degrees. So that's like from 20 degrees to 70 degrees. Those degree increments are the ones that you want to stay within. The ones that you don't want to be within are like from 71 through 90, or 0 degrees through the 20 or through the 19 degrees, right? Or else, because it's not extreme enough to really make you need to do 3-point, unless you want the subtle shift. So we have that information there. So with the camera tilt, I'm going to go like that. That's my camera tilt. Okay. To measure that, we measure inside out. Okay. Because it's just like if we're looking forward, right? Originally our eye level's like this, lined up with our horizon line, right? But as soon as I look down, my horizon line's still here, but my camera is tilting. So that's our camera tilt. I'm now looking at a worm's eye, or at a bird's eye view. Worm's eye view is going to go up. So that's why we measure from the inside out. From the horizon line / eye level downwards. That's going to give us our camera tilt. Okay? So that's that relationship. To find our vertical stationary points, because we are now going from this, right? We are now going from that to that. Okay? We are now going from that to that. So we have to figure out where this lies in relation to the picture plane now. Right? So that is easy, because the relationship to find our vertical stationary point is the distance from our center of vision to our stationary point swung until it crosses our camera tilt. That will give us our VSP, our vertical stationary point. If we project a straight horizontal line, that is our eye level / measuring line / ground plane representative, whatever you want to call it. Okay? And then where that crosses your center of vision line, that is your end point, and that eye level measuring line is where we place our units of measure. Everybody's still with me on that? You guys remember that from the past 2 weeks? Like I said, I'm going to drill 3-point into you. How many of you guys are feeling better about 3-point in comparison to 2-point and 1-point? Good, good. If you guys understand 3-point, you'll be able to do all of the others, no problem. Okay, so we've got that. So now instead of our cone of vision being projected from our stationary point, it is being projected from our vertical stationary point. Because the stationary point is giving us our distance from the picture plane in terms of if we were on our placement in relation to the Earth. Okay? So this is where I'm standing, or this is where I'm hovering over. The VSP is the actual representation of the camera in 3-point perspective. So this is where my 30 degrees is going to be formed. That's my cone of vision, right? So we have those. So now we have our 3 randoms though. We still need our vertical vanishing point. Our randoms were vanishing point 1, stationary point, and the camera tilt. With just those 3 informations, pieces of information, we can now finish off the whole entire grid and get it proper. So, our vertical vanishing point is 90 degrees from the VSP in relation to the CV, the center of vision, or the camera, or where the camera tilt is, okay? So it's 90 degrees to this line, that camera tilt line. Okay, so we have 90 degrees. That is my vertical vanishing point, or VP3. Right? So, the relationships we have established so far is this. Right? Okay, so those are some of the relationships we've established so far. And now we are establishing this relationship. Okay? So we've now established those three relationships. Okay? Quote unquote, different parts of your overall equations. Right? Parts of your formula. We can mix and match any of those. As long as we keep those relationships the same and we understand them, we can create any grid we want from any image we see. Any image we create with our thumbnails. We can create a proper perspective grid to make sure everything is working exactly the way we want it to. But what is the key thing to always remember? If it looks right, it's right. If it looks wrong, it's wrong, no matter how technically sound you made it. If it looks wrong, it is wrong. Okay? Keep that in mind. Alright, so we've got that. Now we need our measuring points. Our measuring points are still the same as we did in 2 point. So for VP1 and VP2, we still utilize the stationary point. It's still vanishing point 1 to the stationary point, swung up onto the horizon line. That is going to give us our measuring points. Alright? Now, to get our third measuring point, that is this. Right? We create a straight horizontal measuring line in the direction of our vertical stationary point, and then it is the distance from our vertical vanishing point to our vertical stationary point swung down. Alright? This gives us MP3, our vertical measuring point. This line here, if you want to give it a name, you can call it a vertical measuring line for all I care. Okay? Because it is working in contrast to the vertical vanishing point. Because this point here, this line here is going to help us measure, find our measurements for verticals. Right? Now we need our pipelines. Pipelines are technically just measuring lines, but we've called them pipelines to give us a point of reference so that we don't confuse it with any other measuring line. Right? Because it holds a much more important role than a normal measuring line does. This is going to help us create the grids. This is going to help us create the underlying grid that is separated in the proper square units. So the rule for a pipeline is that it must originate from the vanishing point and cross through the endpoint, right? That point where the ground plane / measuring line crosses through the center of vision line, right? So for VP1 and VP2, it's obvious to see it. It's really easy to see it because it's visual. Pipeline 3, what line is doing what I just described? For the CVL. So the center of vision line is going to have a double job as well. the center of vision line's other job is to be pipeline 3. Okay? So all of the units of measure that fall on our eye level are also going to be projected from measuring point 3 through those unit of measures until it crosses center of vision line. Just like how we would do it with measuring point 1 and 2 with pipeline 1 and 2. Alright? So I'm going to go from measuring point 3 through the unit of measure, there, like that, there, so on and so forth. So we have the diminishments happening for vertical. Okay? So we've figured out this relationship then. So utilizing those, these are the new relationships we've figured out. Okay? So measuring points. Vertical measuring points. Okay? So we have those relationships. Right? Questions? No? Everybody's pretty good? Yes.
I was gonna ask about center of vision one more time, how do we find it?
Center of vision line.
Color vision.
Cone of vision? Alright. Cone of vision is this relationship. I'll get rid of these two. It's 30 degrees measuring from the eye level out, so inside out, until it crosses your center of vision line. Okay? And then from your endpoint to your 30 degrees, circle time. And that looks terrible. All right. So that's our cone of vision, okay? 30 degrees, although that's more like 50. I tried. So that's your cone of vision. Essentially, if you remember those relationships there, you will be able to create a grid out of nothing. Now, remember, there is a way to check to see if you did your grid properly or if you did your setup properly. And that is by connecting your 3 vanishing points together, right? And if your pipelines, when they cross through, if you created your grid correctly, when your pipelines hit this wall, which is actually your imaginary CVLs, right? It will create a 90-degree angle. Okay, so that is another relationship to keep in mind. So I guess I can do it right here. right? The reason why this works the way it works is because everything is connected to one other thing of a different part of the formula, right? And in 3-point, you are given 3 random choices. The rest of the grid information is given. So let's say right away, I just tell you guys right now, your first 3 random information is VP1, VP2, VP3, right? We understand that in order to we use that relationship already to double check to see if that's correct. Because the pipelines, we have to utilize the pipelines properly. They have to cross through the imaginary CDLs at a 90 degrees. So if all you have is vanishing point 1, 2, and 3, we've got this relationship right here. Understanding that and knowing that pipelines, they have to cross through, they are a line, a measuring line that originates from the vanishing points that cross through the endpoints, right? And the endpoint is where the ground plane / eye level in 3-point perspective crosses through the center vision line, the CVL. Knowing that, then we know, connect the 3 vanishing points, find the 90, we have been given our eye level already, right? We know that vanishing point 1 and 2 must meet at a 90-degree angle from the stationary point. We find that. There we go. We know that to find our vertical stationary point, it is where the stationary point, the distance from the center of vision to the stationary point crosses with the camera tilt. But to find the vertical stationary point first, all we have is this information then. All we have is that swing. We have to find where it's crossing that camera tilt. But to find that camera tilt, we know already that wherever the VSP is, right, in relation to the camera tilt, the center of vision, and the vertical vanishing point is going to create a 90-degree angle. So then, understanding that, we just find, all right, where's this guy and this guy connect at a 90-degree angle on this line, on this eye level that I've created. All right, oh, and hits there. Perfect, that's where the SP crosses. That is what's supposed to happen. That is my vertical stationary point. We have that already. With that, we've already been given our camera tilt angle. Okay? And now we have all the makings of our grid. Now it's just putting in the measuring points. So, let's say just verbally. I give you guys stationary point, camera tilt, VP1. What's a good way to start it off at? Camera tilt, VP1, stationary point.
Find VP2.
Find VP2. How do we find VP2?
90 degrees from the stationary point.
90 degrees from stationary point. What would you guys want to do next? So we now have vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2, stationary point, camera tilt. Anybody besides Steven and Kate?
VSP.
VSP. How do we find the VSP?
You find the VSP by finding the camera tilt and seeing how the SP intersects. with
Yep.
the,
So we've already been given the camera tilt, so we just have to go from the stationary point to the center of vision, swing it over where it hits the camera tilt. That gives us our VSP. What do you find next after that? Because everything else is being given to us at that point. I'll give you guys a hint. It's vertical vanishing point, right? Because it's 90 degrees from the VSP and the CV, right? That gives us our vertical vanishing point. The vertical vanishing point must fall on the center of vision line. So we've already got all that information we need to build our grid. Essentially, making a 3-point grid is nothing more than making a 2-point grid with a vertical vanishing point and a vertical stationary point.